this comparison, I think often people may make it in a way that is not quite appropriate. If you compare India now with China, many people may, at the first instance, say it's not quite comparable. But actually, if you look at China's previous path of history of how it developed, actually India at this moment has many conditions very similar to China about 20, 25 years ago in terms of the demographics, in terms of policies trying to attract foreign investment, and also easing labor regulations, building up infrastructure, and so on. So from that perspective, India is very similar to some decades ago China's position. And so India actually has a very good chance of actually continue to grow rapidly and catching up to a large extent.
Sure. Tao, then how would you react to when people say, look, China is an $18 trillion economy, India is at $3 trillion. It's not just about the direction of travel, but it's also the pace of execution, where China's political system is very different from India's. And India has to look at the federal state politics very closely, has to look at policy transmission very closely for that sort of pace and execution to happen. Whereas China, it's been more, top-down.
Right. I think, from the size perspective, yes, India is relatively small compared to China. But, if we compare just India with the rest of the world, it still has a very large domestic market. And China's size, as I said, in terms of consumption market, India's size is already at China 2006, 2007 level. So that itself is a big advantage. Secondly, when people talk about China's growth is top-down, government-led, I think that's a little bit of a misunderstanding. And China was always government-led, of course, but over the last 30 years, it is actually that allowing private sector to grow, allowing foreign companies to grow, and reducing the importance of the state that really helped outside of infrastructure. In infrastructure, certainly the government played a big role, but I think one of the advantage of the India economy is the relatively low share of state-owned enterprises, which are not efficient in China and could waste a lot of capital. So I think that comparison, sometimes one needs to look deeper to say there's advantage not being settled with large, inefficient state sector.
Tao, I'll take one more question before I hand it to Sam. India is investing a lot in infrastructure. There is a major infrastructure boom happening in India, which is also comparable to what China was doing in 2005, between 2005 and 2010. The concern really is, can India's economic growth commensurate with its infrastructure growth? Because we've seen, and there have been examples of economies in the region where the country could be going very fast on infrastructure development, but economic growth may not catch up as much. And so that gap might be there where India is economically growing at a certain steady pace, which is impressive, let's say 6, 7%, what have you, but still in 10, 20 years has better infrastructure. So do you think that could be India's story?
For India, I think at the moment, the infrastructure, in the last 10 years has definitely improved. But I think, the feedback from businesses and so on is still that infrastructure needs further build-up in India. So I think at this stage, remember in China, 10, 15 years ago, people debated about infrastructure was too much ahead of development, but later infrastructure was largely used up as well. So I think India needs to build ahead to help. So I'm not sure that we need to debate whether they're investing too much. But of course, it's very important to make sure that infrastructure is used. In India's case, I think developing the manufacturing sector is very important. Right now, I think the economy has has been more focused on services. So how to mobilize, policies and the favorable conditions in India to involve more a large share of the population, a large part of the economy in the manufacturing sector, and start to actually maybe also continue to reduce your current account deficit and have increased exports. That's probably a key area to focus on to realize the value of future infrastructure.